So I welcome back everybody to Agile Network India's June 2021 events. And now we are moving to our next event by Hyderabad chapter, which is about leadership in digital age. And we have Kumar Mangalapalli, who is CEO at RightSource Global as a speaker for this discussion. And before we move on, let me thank our founding sponsor, Innovation Roots, which is a leading consulting and training service provider, helping organizations to achieve business agility and beyond. It is one of the leaders and pioneers of niche publishing services and well known for content collaboration with global thought leaders, authors, and creators. You can find out more details at www.innovationroots.com. We would also like to thank our sponsor Agile, which is a product offering from Tata Consultancy Services Limited. It is a purely cloud-based enterprise agile planning tool along with DevOps capabilities. Enterprises can use Agile to adopt agile practices or scale across multiple Scrum and Kanban teams using enterprise scaling frameworks such as SAFe, Disciplined Agile, LESS, and more. You can try out Gile for free for up to 20 users for 30 days by signing up at gile.io. Or you can reach out to us for any kind of questions or inquiries you have, or you wish to set up an exclusive product demo. You can also check out the Gile page on Agile Network India's website for more information, or log on to www.gile.io. Here are some simple steps I request everybody to follow who has joined us as participants in this event. So this is basically for all the events, we request everybody to join at least 5 minutes prior to the event start time. So you are well settled. Use high quality speakers or headphones for better sound quality. Also, I request all the participants to keep microphones muted and videos disabled, as this may cause disturbance to the speaker and it can also cause the bandwidth issue. If, at any point of time you have questions for the speaker, you can make use of the chat box. Please put your questions there, and at the end of this session, the facilitator or moderator will pick the questions as per the time available and in the hand and read it out to the speaker. And at the end of the session, we will also be sharing the feedback forms in the chat. Please take up some time and fill in the feedback for us to improve in the future events. We really appreciate your cooperation in following these simple steps. And with that, let me just call upon Kumar for this session and discuss about this interesting topic about leadership in digital age, which sounds so relevant to the current scenarios we are living in, because leadership is something that will never be out of discussion, be it a small organization or a larger organization or a startup. I was listening to Pete Berein's discussion somewhere recently, and somebody asked him what is leadership, and he says that it is an act of influence, and leadership is not a designation, or leadership is not something specific to one individual or couple of individuals. Leadership is something that we portray sometime or the other in our lives by influencing others in some or the other way. So we all have influenced somebody's decision, somebody's acts at some point in our lives, and we have shown the leadership traits. But how it is important in the digital age, let's discuss with this Kumar. Kumar, I would like to call you upon on the webcam and the microphone and learn from you about this whole thing, leadership in digital age.
Thank you, Nipur. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you everybody for having me here. So good, an interesting topic has been given, and digital age leadership in digital age is something that I think is quite common for us to talk through. But I would want primarily talk about my experience in general in working on the digital space for over 20 years. So let me just start with about me, introducing myself first, right? So I've got over 20 years of experience, working across US, Canada, UK, and back in India, right? I started my career in the software services side, with Infosys Technologies. I've been there with them for a good 10 years, and post that, I've co-founded RightSource Global, with Mr. Uday, who's actually an ex-partner of Accenture. The whole point of co-founding RightSource Global was primarily to focus on product engineering incubation services from India. So we were working with a lot of venture capital firms back in US and UK. We were providing tech due diligence for them, and we were their engineering partner on any of the portfolio companies that these VC firms invested in. Our role typically was to, I would say, be a digital coach, work very closely with the startups right from the ideation phase in terms of building their prototypes, doing the market survey, pretty much everything, being their hands on the ground and trying to get them to the market as quickly as possible. And our exit with these firms would typically be once they are a Series A funded. That is when we would have an option, to either roll over to them. And I'd say roll over, pretty much transition, provide them with the team, infrastructure, and everything that we've worked and come out, or continue as a partner. Right. So I would call RightSource Global as a typical, tech incubator, which has primarily been helping companies, going digital since 2005. Okay, so being a tech incubator technically means doing projects which we really need, a high performance teams to work on, and hence talent acquisition has been very close to our heart. So we also have a business unit which is fully dedicated to talent acquisition, which serves clients across the globe. Okay, and we, given that we are in the incubation space, any of the products which are very industry specific is what we incubate, and InstiCloud is one of them. So currently, I am actively working on InstiCloud and RightSource Global. You'll also see on your screens Mindshare, which is actually our talent acquisition, agency, which is focused primarily on banking and financial services. So with the overall experience that I've got, I think I could probably share some of our journeys on what we've learned over a period of time being in the ecosystem and working on various projects ourselves. So first, let's just define some of the fundamentals in terms of what exactly do we mean, right? As Nupur was mentioning about the agility in digital age, right? So technically, what exactly is working is really finding the right problem on what we are trying to do, or why we are actually trying to solve that particular problem. Ask the right questions with all the necessary stakeholders, and sensing the market gap required, and eventually working on the solution. That's what everybody works on, right? But the key is to really make sure that we iterate over these things, over and over to get to a point where we get the market feedback very closely to it and iterate it in a fail fast model to make sure that we are on the right track throughout. And that's where the whole framework helps in terms of trying to make sure that we are on the right track in solving the problem that we have identified. So the 3 points that we fundamentally look through is never stop asking questions, right? When I say never stop asking questions, it could be across the board. It's just not, with the stakeholders that we work with. In every part of this journey, I think, we should essentially embrace, asking questions and trying to see if there is any relevance for the questions that we've got onto the solution and implement the same thing iteratively. Yeah. Now that's typically what is the definition of agility. I know Priyank was mentioning, saying that Agile Network India was primarily formed few years before, and to make sure that training facilities can be provided on the Agile framework in general. But I think business agility is what is the mantra of the game in the whole thing, and every fundamental process that we apply over Agile software development should be applied across multiple divisions across your organization, and these need to be followed to the T. It's very important for us to live and breathe agility in the digital space across. Now, when I say asking these questions, typically what exactly we are doing is, on a daily basis, you are actually pivoting and adapting to the change that you are defining on what is required, and that is typically what agile brings you. Now, when we say agile, we are talking primarily about digital, during the pandemic side, because most of the businesses, especially the small businesses, got affected big time. Okay, some of the businesses like us had an advantage of having a one-up number because we were digital right from day one. Some of the business unfortunately could not. But I think during these tough times is where we definitely need some sort of introspection. Look at what has helped people who have survived through the pandemic. What who did well, lessons from various people, and I think I really appreciate this particular initiative where we could share at least the lessons that we've learned, and also hear from people on their journey during these tough times. Now, when we are pretty much saying that, when we are talking a disruption, right? For any business, if we are talking about covering your risks, anything could be a disruption. It just happened to be a pandemic at this particular time, but it could be an economic cycle, a recession cycle which might come through. So you never know what comes up. For any business owner or any business leader that you have to look through, you always have to look out at what is coming up, right? And what if some things might happen. So it's quite important for us to really focus on things that really matter to your business. So when you're putting down on what are my priorities, I think it's very important for us to have those priorities in line and look at what is going to happen if something goes wrong at any given point in time, and you definitely need a fallback plan for those. For us to think on fallback plan, I think the focus has to be there on the right thing. So losing your focus might actually be quite disastrous for a business or for a division in terms of what you do. So I would say the first priority would be to focus on things that really matter to the business and matter to the team in general. The second one is get going fast, right? So typically we follow this method of fail fast model, where you're trying to essentially prototype for anybody who's in the tech space. I think it's the standard stuff where we prototype a specific thing, quickly get that to the market, test what is working, what is not working, and pivot on top of it and getting it. So we call it fail fast model, where you would rather fail faster than later and get to a point. But the fail fast model typically has these a control system type of approach, where you are getting the feedback into the system periodically and trying to do your corrections on a periodic basis. We do it bi-weekly, but I think it's very important for any team to look through and figuring out how fast they can fail and the reasons why they are failing, which again are primarily driven from the points which are focusing that you've got, right? And of course, making the good decisions quite quickly and implementing them much quicker is what is the need of the hour, whether it's pandemic or any disruption that we are talking through. And we as a business have gone through multiple disruptions, almost I would say every other week, because as an incubator, we kind of get through these disruptions which disrupt maybe a particular segment in industry or an industry itself, or across the board is what we are getting through. So when we started this 2005, I think the first 1 to 2 years, it was quite a challenge for us to really focus on and tell the world what exactly we do, from an incubation perspective, and work with VCs on setting the foot together to prove really that we could have a world-class product engineering team back from India. Now, talking about culture in general, right? So what we've noticed is typically companies are quite hierarchical in nature, and there has to be a fundamental shift in terms of how do we collaborate with people around and cooperate, through in terms of adding value. So it is always not a client versus a vendor relationship. I think it's always cooperation model, because when you get into a zone where you're innovating, you really don't know what comes forward. Okay, there could be multiple ways to solve a problem. You'll have to pick the right way or a smart way that you think is right. And again, as I said, fail fast before. So I think it's very important for us to set the context right rather than having a pyramidal hierarchical structure. It is typically a network-based collaborative approach is what we've always chosen, and it always works, very well. Now from how do we do this is typically depending on again the culture of an organization, but I would think more like a horizontal than a top-down approach is what works in this. Now, when I say collaborative, you'll have to identify all the stakeholders, who are there in the system. When I say stakeholders, it typically is not just your client partner whom you're working with, right? So your client partner, your vendors who are working on your talent acquisition space, your vendors who are setting up your infrastructure, of course, your employees who go to the core of, they solving the main problem along with you sitting through this, and the entire ecosystem. Because for you to attract talent in terms of changing the world, you would need to have a very good network around, and ANA, of course, is one of the best networks that I found, where we got a lot of advantage in terms of hiring talent from such networks. So cooperation and collaboration, I think, is the name of the game, throughout, whether it's digital or non-digital. But I think the culture has to be fundamentally, this for you to essentially get working quite quickly and failing fast, as I mentioned. Now, how do I find the balance, right? We're talking about quite a few moving parts in general. You're seeing through multiple projects that are happening through, and you'll have to find a balance between what goes on and how exactly do we have to, can we work on these things to make sure that we find that fine balance that we see across the projects. We'll take some examples in a bit, but I'll quickly talk about the fundamental principles that we followed, right? At least from an innovation standpoint. We as a company always believe in starting with a why, right? And I strongly believe, people, when you're buying or selling something, you primarily buy something because the why of why they are selling really connects to the why of why you're buying, and that's the fundamental aspect of why you do things the way you do. So quite important for everybody, again, in the group to understand why we exist in the first place, what we are. And then if you're working on a very specific problem, understand what exactly is a problem and why are we, solving the problem to start with before we get to the what. And one of the key things that we follow here is when we talk to even the new talent, which is coming through during our interviews, we always start with, me talking to them in terms of why we are doing it in the first place, rather than going by a job description or a specific skill set. So it's quite important for us to, understand and set the context and culture right from the first call with anybody new coming into the ecosystem, and then get to the what and what we are trying to do. And eventually, once the team is there, we could figure out, anybody could figure out how to do it. You just need some smart, brains to come through and work on it. But I think the fundamental piece that we've learned, right from day one is to stick to your why very closely. Okay, and this is applicable even on the personal front. It helps quite a bit, if you kind of understand why you're doing what you're doing, that resonates with typically, how you do the things. So that is typically what we follow, and we kind of preach here at RightSource with everybody. Now, the second one is process orientation and data driven, right? I think this I've learned, back at Infosys, very hardly driven by Mr. Narayan Murthy. We used to say at Infi at that particular point in time, in God we trust, the rest of the people come with data. I couldn't forget that. There were fundamental things that drove the business very well for Infosys, and I could typically see, both this process orientation and driven by data for you to make key decisions across the business is where your business will get through. And I got an opportunity to really work at the cusp time with Infosys at the right time, right place. So I was running one of their largest accounts based out in US in the banking side, and worked very closely with the senior leadership, and which is where I had an opportunity to learn some of these fundamentals firsthand from the mentors who actually grew me at that time. right? The second one is, you know, integrating technology, I would say digital with everything. So when we are looking at running a business in general, doesn't matter whether it's a brick and mortar business or a digital business. I think it's very important for you to understand what kind of innovation can go in to make things very smooth on every bit of business that you've got, okay, across all the functions that you do. And I think the key challenge from a leadership standpoint is to look at where else can I, typically use something to make sure I cover any risks that happen. And as I said, it goes across operations, the sales and accounts and stuff. And most of the companies, including the brick and mortar companies, might have realized, especially during this pandemic, the importance of really integrating technology across multiple verticals. Okay, knowingly or unknowingly, a lot of people have already integrated it, but I think there are far better ways of doing it if you actually follow a process in place so that this integration of your functions across all organizations really give a tremendous benefit on the velocity at which you actually move your business, right? Again, coming back from the software development angle, user experience is what drives everything. And when I say user experience, I really don't mean just the user experience on your products, but in general, how everybody is experiencing your business and what kind of value that you bring in, into the ecosystem is what really drives fundamentally where you are. And I think consciously leadership has to look at, what is the experience of everybody in the ecosystem of running a given company, and that's what builds the brand according to me. And I think that experience is what you really have to guard and drive. So people who are front-ending the businesses, like your sales or marketing people have to be very conscious about what sort of an experience that the ecosystem is experiencing from a particular company or a particular brand or a particular solution, and make sure that the same kind of vibe is shown across multiple stakeholders in the entire ecosystem. And that is fundamental in terms of how and the way you do business, and everything, again, as I said, ties back to the why you definitively exist in terms of doing what you do. Now, people, right? We do talk about quite a bit of automation happening. There is robotic process automation going on. Everybody is talking about automation. People are talking about jobs, being out because of these automations and stuff like that. But I think fundamentally what we would have to remember is it is people who are the center of the whole thing. Okay, and all of your automation, technology, digital, implementations, everything that we've talked through are fundamentally revolving around these people, and it is very important for us to understand, that everything caters to somebody in between, and the center of that thing is the people, right? So when I talked about focus just before, right, the same set of fundamentals get applied here at the people segment as well. So we'll have to make sure that the focus is on empowering team leaders across the board. Okay. Again, integrating everything from a technology standpoint on being process oriented. And one thing, again, which we've learned from some of our very good clients is building a star team versus having a team of stars. Okay. It's very easy said than done, but I think once you have a star team in place, you pretty much have a guarded team which trusts each other and works during times like this. And that is when you actually see a tremendous benefit of building a star team, and you could really see where exactly we are during these times. So it's a good, during these trying times, it's very important for leaders to really do some introspection and see, do we have a star team in place or do we have a team of stars across, right? And again, from a hiring perspective, I think everybody will agree with me saying that fundamentally we'll have to hire on attitude. Of course, we'll look at skill as well, but skill is something that can be honed over a period of time. And that's the reason why we here at RightSource typically do our um, recruitment process the other way around. I talk to them as a CEO as a first call, and then my partner talk to them. Eventually, that is after that is when the business unit leaders come in, and they will look at the skill and stuff like that. And I think that really helped us in terms of creating wonders across. Right now, we've talked specifically about organization. We've talked very specifically about people. Now, interlinking both is what is the fundamental, I would say, the responsibility of any leader on how do I really empower my employees and integrate them very closely to the organization's vision that we've got. Again, when I say vision, let's not forget it fundamentally starts with the why. Okay, and if you're primarily looking at your own organizations, you should always be questioning, saying, are we on the right track, and is there something that we'll have to do to make sure that things would go automatically without a, a specific dependency on a given process or a person. Okay, those have to be questioned on a periodic basis, and really judge whether can we stand up right where we are if there's a disaster down the road. And then of course building your leadership internally, right? So when I say building leadership, what I've seen is if you're very close to your fundamentals very well, then leaders will be born automatically, because everybody knows the primary reason on why we exist, and if all of them are working towards the same goal, I think that is where you actually can breed leadership very well. Now, I'll spend quite a bit of time here in terms of giving some examples on what we've done. I've used the word digital transcendence here, because digital transformation is what has been used quite a bit. And I think when you say digital implementation, it is not just transformation, but what businesses should experience is really a transcendence phase. And if you do it right, that is where you see the products working fairly well. So across, over, I would say, about 13 to 14 years, we've done close to 18 incubations. Okay, and out of 18 incubations, about 12 of these companies were funded by likes of Sequoia. And I will take some of the success stories from what we've done through, and we'll really go over how did we apply what I've talked just about, all these fundamentals in running the business and working with people very closely with some examples, so you can hear these stories and probably relate to what I've talked about, for the past 20-25 minutes. So the first one, which I'm quite proud of, is actually a global shopper services company based out of Dallas in Texas, USA. These were a cab driving services company who were looking for offshore services to basically scale their black cab services in the Dallas Fort Worth area, primarily in Texas. Okay, that was what the problem that we were trying to look at, and they approached us because we were based out in India, and they could pretty much get like a service from an operation standpoint to take these calls from companies who would actually book a cab to pick up and drop their employees back and forth in Texas. And if you really know the US landscape, Dallas is just picking up right now. This was way back in 2005. So we looked at the problem and pretty much identified, saying, we could have an end-to-end technology solution for these companies to make sure that we have the integrated technology and operations model to convert a cab service company into a chauffeured company where they don't necessarily have to have ownership of the cabs. So we created a model around the whole thing where we had a technology team identifying the entire business process with their business owners, marked on the entire workflow of what happens from the time when a company requests for a cab versus the whole experience of what gets through and across. So you marked all of those things and created a process around it. This was, of course, driven by a fundamental digital solution which we created for them. So the workflow goes like this, right? So the employee, let's take an example of, I would say an Accenture, right? So an Accenture transport and logistics department would actually reach out to us saying an executive is coming and needs to be picked up from, Dallas DFW airport, right? And when executives come in, we also have a choice of what kind of the car is required versus what is required in the car, what language does this executive speaks to, what is necessary for it. So that the whole experience of going in these black top cars is what we've covered across the board, and gotten to a point where we would actually track a flight, okay, which is a digital solution against it. So we know who is coming on in a given flight to track the flight, whether the flight is on time or not. We would obviously stay in touch with the drivers on the ground and make sure the drivers are at the right place. And the entire process of a pickup to a drop was completely taken care of the team here, both from an operations perspective and from a technology standpoint. Okay, and when we started, this cab service company was having close to about 80 or 90 black top cars based out in Texas, and the engagement was about a good 2.5 to 3 years. And during these 3 years, what fundamentally happened was, this company uh, got rid of their cars, and the entire black top thing was a network based chauffeur services thing where drivers would directly work with them, or subcontracting companies who own these cars would directly work with them with their brand as logo. Okay, and in within a span of 3 to 4 years, the company was able to convert from a local Dallas based taxi cab service company to a global chauffeur services company, and they went big bang, with the technology approach. And the reason why I like it very well is, uh, if you look at the problem that we try to solve, I think it's way back at the bottom of the pyramid. And I like the problems that exist at the bottom of the pyramid because the impact is very high. And whenever we talk about our digital transcendence projects, this is the first thing that we typically look at it. The interesting fact, right? So this was back in 2005, 2006. That's when we got, and we offered the client, saying that now that the mobile technology is coming through, we should probably offer something to the B2C space as well, because their business was fundamentally B2B. So we said, anybody could call. It's not necessarily a transportation department personnel from a big company. Anybody could call from the road and do the same thing. You could provide the same thing, and once the mobile service gets more mature, you will be at a situation where things could be a lot more better. And we never realized that we were talking about something very fundamental, which eventually turned out to be your Ubers and Olas of the world. But we were pretty much around the corner, and I felt that was a miss at that particular point in time, primarily from us, as leaders, in terms of envisioning something that would come and cash in on that opportunity. But that's the global software services engagement that we've done, right? The second one, that I wanted to talk was actually a 3D modeling pursuit. But I would want to give a little bit of background on what exactly happened, right? So we were working with a startup which was trying to build a product which is a lightweight product compared to an AutoCAD for a 3D modeling, right? And AutoCAD, as you might be knowing, it's a very heavy software and requires a farm of servers to run through, and you cannot pretty much leverage this on the desktops at that particular point in time. Now they've got lightweight products as well. But when we were working on this particular solution, the need of the hour was a lightweight 3D modeling software, where without downloading any product onto your PC, you could pretty much do it on a browser. That was the need of the hour, and we worked with this startup again, based out of US, on trying to solve this problem. So it took about 2 to 2.5 years for us to really figure out and get the solution out in place. And they had a very sweet product, that we built through, could work with your satellite imagery and your remote sensing data very well, stitch the whole data and create 3D models out of it. And that was about the time when there were wars, between the great maps of in the digital space between Apple and Google. And Google ended up buying up this company, and this product was primarily implemented there. And because we know the product inside out as we were developing it, we ended up creating a team of 400 3D modelers across who were working out here from India for this particular company and built what you see, across on the virtual world in 3D was built by the team, from our team only. So that was one of the very good projects that we've done, and we've seen through the entire digital application of what we've done from a product building perspective and the complete range of applying the same thing and having something, and that is eventually what you would gives you a kick in terms of saying you can see the whole thing, your product, playing through and solving the problem. So that was our second one. The third one was on the digital management, waste management space, right? This was a global giant which had quite a few resorts across the world. Okay, and typically in hospitality industry, you'll have to be on your toes to attract customers all through. So this company was trying to redo their properties and rooms periodically, and whenever they do it, obviously there's a lot of waste that comes out, in this whole process of redoing your properties and renovating the resorts and stuff like that. So again, the problem typically came up saying that they would need a digital solution to manage this whole waste to a point where the client would want to track the waste to the final T and see what percentage of the waste was actually reused or recycled across. And their goal was to get to a 99% waste. Okay, and that's what we would have to track. So we went onto the ground there, understood the entire process, working with various general contractors across, right? So the kind of stakeholders that are there through are typically general contractors who are not really educated, right? But they do their stuff, they're contractors who are pretty much doing the heavy lifting on building these resorts and stuff like that. So you pull out everything, you break everything through, pull out necessary things, dump it into a truck, and then trucks go out and take this waste out, and somewhere else they are managing it. So we've identified the entire workflow of how it happens across. Okay, and this was a pretty good example because there was nothing digital in this project at all, right? So we were talking to quite a few people, and most of the people on the ground were not even able to talk English. So we had to create a digital solution for all the stakeholders across, okay, to make sure that they do their work very cleanly, okay, but at the same time we get the ball rolling. And also, if you're getting into a digital space, obviously a project that would probably take about 6 months of time, the goal was to get it done in 3 months. Okay, and those 3 months would be additional revenue, to the client, because they could pretty much have their rooms much quicker, and that will turn into revenue for them. So typically, the one which started as a convenient project to manage the waste ended up becoming an end-to-end digital product, which is used worldwide right now by this company to manage their entire construction and redesigning parts of their resorts. Now, this is of course a combination of various mobile applications for all of them, application modules for all of them. So it's one mobile app across for everybody who's actually at the general contractor level who are picking up this waste, the transport people who are coming in and driving those lorries, the security personnel who would allow them inside, the individual waste processing centers in terms of what they are doing through, and finally that will come out into a certificate on telling exactly how much waste that we manage across in that particular project. Okay, from a timeline perspective. Fantastic project again. I think for us, it probably took about 2.5 years to have that really working on the ground. But the best part is the user experience there, because you don't necessarily need to know anything. All you have to do is do certain icons and do your work very well. But we've structured to a point where the whole thing happens in a very process oriented way. Like to give an example, let's say there's a hotel room that is going down to construct a new thing. So you take the carpets out. So the first thing that you do is you take all the carpets out and load only carpets in that particular room, not anything else. all the carpet goes into one truck, all the marble goes into other truck, all the brass goes into other truck. So identify the patterns where you get the whole thing. And if there is something which is not there at the right place, that is anchored and flagged as a red thing, and it will not move from there. And the transportation front, you would have to work with digital maps very closely. So the resorts were quite operational. So a big truck would not come into a resort during the resort time. So we had to manage and maintain to a point where the truck uses only a specific route allocated to them at that particular point in time. And the security guard also knows exactly that is the truck required at any given point in time. And that was, again, this was way before when we've got these whole Google Maps in place. So we had to really create custom maps for a given truck and track them through to a point where are they at the right time at the right place and they're going or not. That was one of the amazing, digital engagements that we've done. Again, seeing it end to end, used by users gives quite a bit of kick in terms of what we do. Now, the fourth one is our own company, right? So it's an AI-based interview platform that we've created. What it typically does is it takes a recruitment workflow throughout, right from your sourcing, to identifying to a point, posting your job post across to your first round of telephonic interview, which is fully automated. It's an IVR-based telephonic interview. You can either do an audio or a video interview, which is fully automated again. And it is ranked to a point where if 15 or 500 people have taken your test, it will AI-based algorithm will tell you who are the top 50 or 75 where you could work very closely for the closures, and it helps improving your recruitment efficiency. And this is typically is what the engine that we use in our talent management thing currently on the Mindshare, and also the senior executive talent management that we do, and that's one of the amazing products that we worked on, and with the leverage of the tools that we've got, what we have identified during pandemic. The reason why I wanted to bring this out, to all of you is post-pandemic we were primarily providing talent management services only to the banking and financial services and insurance domain globally. Okay, so we had a team of about 15 people based out in Bangalore who were primarily recruiters who would recruit for these companies globally. Okay, they were doing the work of about 45 to 50 recruiters, just leveraging the solution that we've got. Okay, and we did extremely well before pandemic. During pandemic, we went out to our client and said there's a lot of talent available, and this is a time for you to really go remote and scale your talent to do all your stuff. And luckily the trading and high frequency trading industry was doing extremely well during that time, so it worked quite well for us. And during pandemic we actually did 4 times more business than what we would do before pandemic. Okay, and the reason why I'm highlighting that is, knowingly or unknowingly, because we were in digital space, we were really able to leverage our prowess in the digital field fairly well on the ground. And because we were fundamentally solving the problem, we were able to really take the business to the next level and help our clients also do that. And that is when we kind of said that we should probably preach what we've done all through, and that's the outcome of what this meeting is. And currently we are working on a next generation learning platform on the education space. Again, it started as a pro bono work where me and my partner were working together to help local schools around during pandemic to identify the right technology products to use and to just make sure that they're able to leverage the tools available on the ground to conduct their operations and keep the kids engaged. That's how it started. It started as a 3-month pro bono work, and what we realized is there is fundamentally nothing available, okay, which gives that blended learning experience to students. Because we had our network both in UK and US, we reached out and see what kind of tools the West is using, to engage students and get through, and it's quite fragmented in nature. So that is typically what we're working on. Again, I think it's a very fundamental product that we're working on. very difficult to get into the market because education sector in general is it's not a business, right? It's typically treated as trust in India, and even at the West, it is quite different. So we are working on a problem on creating a blended learning platform which blends and creates a hybrid model on what you do in a class physically versus what happens in a digital space for students to have a very personalized experience on learning and education. So these are some of the projects that we worked on, and I wanted to highlight these things because these are hardcore digital in nature on how we've helped companies transcend from where they were to a completely new level, which we're very proud of. Right. So that those are the applications of what I've talked about, our fundamentals and our value to the ecosystem in this. I can take any questions at this particular point in time, but before I jump into the questions, I really want to thank Agile Network India and Innovation Groups. Priyank, your team is rocking. Navina, thank you for inviting me here. Open for questions.
Thank you, Kumar. It was an amazing presentation. There's a question by Madhu. That's a long question. She says, I've been watching How to Train Your Dragon along with the Sun. I think this movie has a lot of lessons to be learned on leadership and its skills. The alpha protects them all. Most of us are in hierarchical structure at our respective organizations. Most of the time you have to cover up mistakes or wrongdoings by your so-called subordinates. How do leaders actually handle such situations? What is your take on this? So first of all, have you watched How to Train Your Dragon?
I did with my kids, luckily, so so I'm prepped well.
Okay,
So,
great.
so I find it as a fundamental cultural difference in how you raise your kid, right? What I've seen is failures are always looked down upon culturally on what we do, and I think we should stop doing that. We should start putting failures on our shoulder very proudly because typically if you fail, as I said, fail fast is what we use. When you fail, that is when you learn, and these failures is what we should really celebrate, I would say, right? I've seen that happen very well in the West, where when we go out to these accelerator programs and stuff like that, entrepreneurs are very proud about the companies that they've tanked before. Okay, and people come with saying I've tanked 4 companies and this is my 5th shot on what I'm trying to do. That gets a lot of maturity in your entire thought process. So I personally would recommend, Madhu, that we should bring our kids to really take risks, okay, to an extent where it's okay to fail, right? And once you are at that particular point in time where you are learning from these failures, that is when the real learning happens, right? But if you're not taking risk, you're not even failing, and that is typically what any person should do, according to me. And if we stop looking at these failures as a taboo or something that is looked down upon, okay, then the fundamentally that mindset is gone, and that's what we use in our hiring session, right? I'm more keen in terms of working with people who failed in the past, because people who have failed understand the real reason of what it means to really succeed in something, and that failure gives you those lessons. So I would actually embrace failure and really build on failures.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just are on time, but if you can quickly answer this question by Gajanan, who's asked, current hiring process are more towards skills or competencies and experiences. It is difficult to judge attitude during an hours long interview, which is so true. Would you like to suggest any technique for this? If you can briefly tell us about this.
Yeah. So again, I think that's the fundamental aspect of using automation, right? So when I talked about automation on recruitment space, uh, we don't want to take the human factor out of human resources. Right? The human factor has to be very keen in terms of looking it through, but rest of the things can be automated. And typically, when you start with a why, it makes things very easier. You have to understand why a person is working for. You'll have your needs. Most uh, money is probably should be a byproduct of what you do, right? It's easier to preach than done. But if you are able to connect with the why of a person, I think getting to the attitude is very important, right? So when somebody is at a vulnerable situation, that is when you truly see the character of a person. And I think, as I said, we followed from a hierarchy perspective. If I might say, we would follow the first round of an interview by a CEO, and we would do that only if you find the right candidate, right? So when you're actually connecting your why, your personal why, with your organizational why, and see if there's a connect with the individual's why whom you are hiring through, it is very easy to get the attitude aspect fairly well, right? I would recommend starting with the why.
Thanks once again, Kumar, for this amazing discussion.